Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Today's video is regarding the recent podcast on 5 pillars between Dilly Hussein and Jayda Fransen. It is the first time, wallahi, that I have come across this lady. I've seen a couple of things in the past from Dilly Hussein and the 5 pillars, but I'm not like absolutely what's the word I'm looking for? Just absolutely devoured is the word I'm looking for. I've not devoured their content in any kind of vigorous way. I have with blogging theology until recent times when I just started banging out these videos myself. But quick mention is that I listened to this on a long drive that I recently went on an A road and M roads across the south of England, and so I stopped listening to it a few times. It was 3 hours long, but I was just driving and listening, and it really helped pass the time. It was really worthwhile in that sense. But I've not made any notes. I'm just going to give you basically my rough vibe. So Jayda Fransen, I believe, is the former deputy leader of some kind of British nationalist party, Britain First. And Dilly Hussein is a Muslim podcaster who has conversations with these kind of fringe figures. And the main thing that I took from it is actually kind of agreeing with a fair bit of what she said. And I think that at the end of the day, you'd expect that from a practicing Christian and practicing Muslim have way more that brings them together than what separates them. And the podcast ended with a kind of a mention that, look, yes, obviously Christians and Muslims will disagree on theological points, and that's fine. But what we need to do is put that to one side and talk more about societal, sociological infrastructure. How can we work together as a community? How can we best live a prosperous life? And so, yeah, obviously, the reality is that Christians think Muslims are going to hell. Muslims think that Christians are going to hell. That's not, it sounds very, to people who don't like the idea of hell, to the people that don't even believe in hell, funnily enough, they kind of find that a very strange and pressing and uncomfortable idea. But it can kind of be pretty, whatever. Like, if you have conviction, you have faith that what you're doing is the best thing, then somebody doing something different is not an issue. So I guess just off that thought, what I want to do with this channel is focus on bringing together Christians and Muslims as brothers and sisters in faith, because we become the majority of the world. At the end of the podcast, what was being spoken about was kind of globalist, Zionist, kind of creeping up on the conspiratorial vibe, but also something that we can look at empirical facts to call a reality. The divide and conquer political tactic that's been used for millennia, and think about all the kind of conflicts that are happening in the world and their political motivations, the proxy wars that take place, that is to say wars that happen between two warring parties, but really being backed by other larger entities, and the power plays at hand. And what I'm trying to say is that I think that it can be very powerful for people of faith, Christians and Muslims, for example, to come together and to encourage the other half of the world and the rest of society that are getting swept up in all of this new age liberal mumbo jumbo, whether that be LGBTV, whether that be the new age education system, whether that be, what's a great example of wokeism now? I mean, focusing so much on race that's the one thing I did disagree with Jayda on, is the fact that she doesn't like interracial marriages. And I'm obviously an example of, my own life is an example of an interracial marriage. It's a B, but Bismillah, hopefully it won't sting me. It will lose its life if it does. Obviously, I've got an example of that, and I think that there's kind of people that have this purity idea that we as a race, we don't want to dilute our genes. But has that not just been the history of entire humanity? Like, say, to be English, to be British involves Viking, French, Norman, Roman, European, Celtic, Pike, all over the place. Like, that's just life, is that we always mix. And I don't personally see an issue with interracial mixing, and that does, I don't claim it as a racist belief. Like, you can believe what you want to believe, and if you would prefer, based on your preference, to marry somebody of the same ethnicity of you, then crack on, do that, that's fine. But I wouldn't encourage against it. And that was the big difference in the podcast I felt between Islam and this kind of Christian nationalism, which, to be honest, I was thinking Jayda would make a fantastic Muslim. She has that zeal and that vibe that is present across the board in Islam, and herself declaring that she wants to mimic what she sees in the minority Muslim communities with the indigenous people of this country of England, the white British people. But the problem is that the majority of the white British people have left God, have got on board with the atheistic. I mean, what's common across the woke agenda mentality is no children, is following whims and desires. So, you know, it's just an ego-driven roller coaster of going to parties, getting drunk, head in the sand, focusing on a career that has basically no meaning. You know, working in some office or some corporation, what impact does that really have compared to having children? And the traditional look, this is what I want to get across, right? What I want for, because the uniqueness of this channel really, I guess, is predicated on the fact that I am an Englishman. I am an Englishman who loves his country, and there's plenty of reason for that. Look, I visit friends and family in East Sussex, in Dorset, in Cornwall, in Buckinghamshire, and just the landscape, the variety of plant life, animal life, the beauty, the hills, the peaks, the areas of outstanding beauty, and the national parks. It's just like, this island is glorious, amazing, beautiful, and to me are clear signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all over the place. I do believe that the Christians, the Father, so to speak, is Allah. They are the same God, the God of Jesus, the God of Moses, the God of Abraham, the God of Muhammad, peace be upon all of these prophets. But I digress. My point is that as an Englishman, I want what's best for this country, and I would much prefer the Christian. I'd be happy to rewind 100 years or 75 years to a country that had traditional British values. And Jayda, to be fair to her, made a good point that comes to mind right now, and it really was the fact that when the English, this is what she's heard, her experience in Britain first was, you know, these Muslims covering up, you know, wearing their hijabs, wearing their niqabs, and it's like, you know, covering up, our women don't cover up, our women wear mini skirts, and we get drunk and we get lair, and it's like, alcoholism or being paralytic, just be excessively drunk, is nothing to be proud of. And women wearing mini skirts is something that's happened literally, the baby boomers in literally just the last generation or so, is that came in. History in this country was one of modesty and one of faith, one of religion, and so one of celibacy, one of marriage, one of, you know, being discreet and dignified. And so really, like I say, a call back to traditional values, whether people embrace Christianity or Islam. Obviously, I would prefer Islam because myself, I am Muslim, and that seems to be a clear and obvious path, because accepting Jesus as God is what I felt was a huge difficulty, you know, in relation to the creed and the kind of core doctrine of Christianity. But at its heart, I must say that I believe that Christianity is Islam. The religion that Jesus practiced was Islam, but it has been augmented and changed, and you add, you know, you put Christmas trees in houses and give Jesus the 25th of December for a birthday. It's like, these things anybody can research. You know, there's been a pagan Christian amalgamation during the Roman period of empire that has meant that Christianity of the people in the life of Jesus, all of which were practicing Jewish people who believed that the prophecy had been fulfilled, is very different to the Pauline Christianity that we really have today, that's been changed and has adjusted to social expectations, to societal norms. And that's why you have the wokeism and LGBTV getting brought into a faith that traditionally absolutely would not stand for sex outside of marriage or sex between people of the same. Well, the thing is, marriage, again, people don't like this, but marriage is a contract between two humans, a male and a female, and the creator of that male and female, God. It's a contract between three people. Forgive me, a contract between three parties, the two people and a supernatural being. And so marriage in a traditional context is nothing to do with the states, and is really now been, and this blows things up as well. I mean, again, Jayda spoke about it. When you talk about things like what was it, something she said, over 100 million babies aborted in what time frame, in a recent time frame. This country is just all over the place, and I haven't looked into the Zionist agenda too much. I kind of focus on myself, kind of thing, but it does seem peculiar that so much stuff that is so far from what appears normal and natural and decent to me is being pushed, and it's also being accepted. And it's a very dangerous game when, you know, the pill and abortion are available, because now we have sex galore with no responsibility, and people think that that's a good thing, that's a liberating thing. It's this whole flip of everything upside down. What people think is liberating is actually enslaving. SubhanAllah. So I thought that the podcast was great, and I think that, to be honest, this is the point I'm going to make, right? The power of having decent, honest, and open conversations between people with differing views that can unite under a more foundational issue, which is to bring peace and prosperity to humanity. That then completely attacks any, if it exists, nefarious agenda to subvert, you know, the people of this world. So I'm not kind of getting too conspiratorial with it. I'm just thinking, like, it is a fact that divide and conquer is the oldest political trick in the book. So when it comes to wars, obviously we want to turn, for example, Christians against Muslims and Muslims against Christians. I say we, like, that would be the aim of any form of agenda that wants to cause, you know, destabilization, so to speak. I mean, I was even thinking about today when I was speaking to my wonderful father. You know, often there's a lot of tension between, for example, Islam and women. That's the perception. But why is it that more English women embrace Islam than English men? And it's by quite a disproportionate amount. Why is there so much tension between Islam and homosexuality? That seems to be how it's portrayed. But then people are realizing that the path of al-Islam is a more fulfilling and prosperous life than the debauchery or the just kind of do as you please, do what you want forever. It doesn't bring any long-term peace and kind of sustained gratification. And so, again, as I've spoken about on this channel before, lakum deenukum waliya deen. What people do in the privacy of their own home is none of my business, and I don't care. Now, I would obviously encourage people to become Muslim, get married and have children, but if they don't want to do that, then they have free will, they're in control of their own life. But this kind of like fear-mongering and hate, and, you know, Muslims think that, you know, gay people should be killed or persecuted. This is absolutely a far cry from what I think, and I would be happy to sit down with Muslim people who think that that should be the case. Now, I think that what is reprehensible and disgusting and absolutely vile is bringing the private into the public sphere. That is not good for orderliness and for a decent society to go onwards and upwards. Because when you have these marches, the LGTV marches, and you've got basically mandem with a bull gag in their mouth, you know, pretending to do each other up the you-know-where, what, why, like when there's kids about, it's mind-blowing. What you do in the privacy of your own home is between you and your God, right? It's between you and Allah, and we'll all be called to account. And that's I don't even want to know about that. But when is being brought in, there's one thing, freedom of speech. It's one thing to start saying, you know, I say bring it to the streets, talk about why this is the best life to live. That's what Dawah is. We're obligated to say, look, this is the message, this is the lifestyle, this is what we say is best. Take it or leave it. And if people have counter narratives, then bring them to the table and we have a big discussion. But that's very different to, you know, kind of explicit content being put into the face of the public, subhanallah. So yeah, I think Jayda, to kind of conclude, because I'm really happy that I've kind of got myself going, and maybe I'll do a part 2 inshallah, but to see what the reaction to this video is. But the main vibe is, other than the dislike of the interracial marriage, which I felt was very tribalist. Now again, in Islam, our tribe is the people of the same faith as us, so it's a belief system rather than a genetic code or a skin color or even a specific nation. I see all, and what I love about Islam is I see all human beings as human beings, and I'm happy to mix, I'm happy to come together. It makes no difference to me. I think there's beauty in diversity of, you know, this is the mad thing, is that people in the modern world, there's a diversity in color, gender. You know, you have a African person, an Asian person, you have a woman and a man, you have different people of different abilities, disabilities, neurodiversities, sexual orientation, as if that should be part of why somebody gets a job. Allah knows what the real agenda is here, but my point is that you have a diversity in everything but belief. You all have to be under the woke agenda banner. If you speak out against LGTB kind of movement agenda marches, you speak out against the kind of women paying the tax, working, the cost of living crisis, all of this kind of wokey new age stuff about boys being girls, girls being boys, and how that is then seen as, you're now got the virtual signature, you're a bad person. But what I'm saying is, why not sit down at the round table and say, look, this is what I think, and you know, I'm open to speaking to trans people, I'm open to speaking to gay people, I'm open to speaking to Christians, I'm open to speaking to every single human being, if they aren't going to just get bare trigger city on the situation, and it's going to get awkward and tension in, it's going to become this, I don't want to debate and have like a warring match. I'm just saying, look, I am living my life, and my call is to say, I became Muslim, I got married, and I had a child, and inshallah I'll have many children, and it's been nothing but prosperous for me. And so that's what I'm calling other people to do. And I'm spreading the message that, yeah, shock horror, we are a creation and there is a creator, and that creator is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I could ramble on all day, but I think I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to, inshallah, do a part 2 to this video. The world is a bizarre and peculiar place, but although I don't agree with Jayda regarding interracial marriage, I do think that what she says carries some weight. And this is what I always found peculiar about, again, my situation as Anglo-Islamic, being the Anglo-Islamic gentleman, is that I kind of, you know, I was never Britain first, or I'm not part of any of these political groups or anything like that, but I do understand the kind of the native struggle, so to speak, you know, the national identity, and this rubbing up against multiculturalism, which always seemed peculiar to me, that you get drops of it and that's fine, but you know, there's like a tipping point. So I understand all the political confusion from the people who are on the far right side. So I have an empathy, so to speak, like I've spoken about in the past. When you think about illegal immigration, it's a no-brainer that that's a bad thing. But I did also sense to her, like, to live in segregated communities, white-only communities, that was something difficult. For example, she said that if she was in charge of Britain, that, you know, it would be send all of the non-white people back to their ancestral homelands, and, you know, the white Muslims in Great Britain, of which there's well over 100,000, you know, they would be encouraged to stay, but they could not practice their Islam. So there would be no freedom of religion, freedom to practice, freedom of speech. So it gets quite worrying at that point, because England right now, Britain, the United Kingdom of Great Britain, is a pluralist, open, free society where people can practice. And, you know, there's supply and demand in the market, and the market right now says that mosques are being built all over the shop. There's extensions on the mosques. Churches are dilapidated and derelict, and the Muslims try and buy them up, but they'd rather put them into apartments because, you know, God forbid that the old churches become mosques, because the churches are vacant, empty, and the mosques are packed out full to the brim. And so, you know, it's supply and demand. It's the market reality that, you know, if people are all buying a particular car, you know, the Ford Fiesta is the best selling car, for example, or the Tesla Model 3 is the best performing car of the year. Well, this just means that it's the best product. And I think that we find that very clearly with Islam in Britain, and in particular my country of England today. Like, the market force speaks for itself. More people than ever are becoming Muslim, and I think that it's the people who don't like that who are getting a little bit antagonized. And to conclude on this point, Jayda, she said it herself, she does respect the strength, the power, the continuity of the minority Muslim communities in this country, being a mere 5, 6, 7%, but yet making up, you know, the numbers of the children being born, the stability in the families, generally speaking, the husbands and fathers being the head of the household, the traditional values. It's like the replacement rate in this country, and this is a good point. I know I said it would be my last point, but this in fact will be my last, is the low fertility rate in this country is actually being propped up by the Muslim and religious minorities. It's about 1.6 right now. But when you take away the minority that's almost producing the majority of the babies, or at least will be in, you know, several years, you know, you then go as low as like 1.2, perhaps 1.3. So subhanallah, I call all people of all religions and all races to have as many babies as possible and not buy into the mainstream propaganda narrative. But I also call people to investigate Islam, inshallah, embrace Islam, ask open-hearted, honest, investigating questions in the comment section, rather than just spout a load of hate because you've got nothing better to do with your life. But Allah knows best, makes no difference to me. And of course, become Muslim, get married, have children, and inshallah, join the family. So thanks so much for listening. Very much appreciate your time. And you know what's coming. Always remember, big up your good selves. Until next time, good folk.